Hi guys, and welcome to the start of the new vlog. Hopefully in this one we're going to get some engineering done instead of just updates about what we've been doing and what's going on. So the first job that I'm going to film and show is a crankshaft assembly that come in. It come in as a cross flow. I didn't really know much more than that about it, but because I've just built a Formula Ford engine, so I know the weights, the minimum weights that people want, and the customer said that he wants the flywheel machining down to a certain minimum weight. I'm assuming that this is out of a Formula Ford. So this is how it's been dropped off to me. The first thing I'm going to do is weigh the crankshaft and write that down, weigh the flywheel, and then take the weight off it to get it down to its minimum weight, what the customer wants. And what I'm going to try and do also is, instead of, like a lot of people, they'll machine from the inside out, but what I'm going to try and do is machine from the outside in, so it actually brings all the weight to the center. So although technically it will weigh the same as what they require for the rules, because we're taking it from the center and not the outer, it should hopefully have a better effect because of the centrifugal force and things like that, and the weight being out wide instead of in tight. Well, I don't know if that's how that works, but that's how my head kind of gets around it anyway. So we'll weigh this now, we'll see what it's at, we'll stick it in the lathe and start to get some weight off it. So with the scales reset, the first thing to do is to just put the flywheel on the scales, and it basically weighs 8.45 kilo. So I'm going to make a note of that, and then we'll try and start to machine it from this part in. So we've got the cross flow flywheel in the lathe, and like what I said before, is I want to take it from the outside in. And what I'm going to do now is just lock the machine off and take an initial cut just to see how much weight that takes off. So I'll machine this, weigh it, make a note of how much it takes off, and then I'll know roughly how much more's got to come off to get the weight where I want it. So what I'm thinking is that really shouldn't have took much off, but I know what I've, oops, let me just move that. Yeah, that shouldn't have taken a lot off, but I know exactly how much I've come in by over that much. So that will give me a rough inkling of where I need to be with it to get it down to the size that we need. Right, now I know what that's taken off, I can start machining a little bit harder and get some of this lump off it now. another quick check. We'll have another quick weigh in because we don't want to go too far with it. Should be the last bit now to come off. And what that should do is just leave me a few grams on top for allow for balancing. Running this paper over it just to get rid of any burrs and bits. So one last check on the scales and we should be there. Yeah, it's 0 now, and the weight limit for this is 8.28. So what that leaves me is a little bit of a buffer there, because when I balance it, I'm going to have to drill some holes in it, and then should be bang on then. And I'll show you the finish. So it looks really good. I've taken more weight out of here to try and get the weight from the outer part, and then just ran along here. So I took some of that boss away. But that's absolutely exactly where I wanted it to be, so I'm chuffed about that. So with the weight off the flywheel, I'm now going to weigh the crankshaft. I'm going to take the bolt out first. In all fairness, I need to let him know that that bolt's not good enough as well, because that's quite a soft material. But it'll do for putting the front pulley on to balance it. But because I'm going to balance just the crankshaft, I don't need that and that on. And then switch the scales on. And then weigh the crankshaft. So it weighs 11.5 kilos. So what I need to do now is just make a note of that. Well, I've put my Sharpie, I'll go and find that. Just make a quick note on that bit of paper. 11.5. So now I'm going to put these details into the balancer, get this crank on the balancer, and we'll see how far out that is. Ooh. I've probably got to just adjust the hard rotors for the balancer just to get them in the right position. It's still set up for Evo 9. What's that for? A little bit tight. So I'll loosen off the clamps. Then what I'm going to do is start the balancer up and then just let the crankshaft find its own centre, and then just move these so they're not over the oil holes in the crank. That noise is it hitting the oil gallery. Because we've done a few of these now, I will have the crankshaft's data saved into the computer, so that's just a case of selecting the crank. So if I go on to rotor and then just find Formula Ford or Crossflow 1600. Where's the top? There we go, 1600 Crossflow. And then if I press information, that will tell me the weight, so I can just trim that down a bit. And then I just need to trim a bit of reflective paper for the RPM sensor, and we put that onto TDC 1 and 4. Like that. So now we're going to just start this machine up to take the initial reading of the crankshaft. Sometimes it just needs ever such a slight trimming in for the RPM. I've got to bring the RPM down because I'm testing at 800 revs per minute. Can't get more of it in the screen. So I'm going to let it run a couple of times because this is showing where it is out of balance. So as a static dynamic mass, it's in balance, or as a static mass, it's in balance, but it is out on each end. So what I'm going to do is just bring it down on the flywheel end, bring it down on the front pulley end, and then bolt the other bits on. So we'll do some modifications to that now. So this is the crankshaft now in balance. I'll just save the data and hold it. So we've got it down from 18 grams on the flywheel side and 13 down to 5 and 3, or 5.5 and 3.8. So what I'm going to do now is on the flywheel, on the crankshaft, I'm going to bolt on the flywheel that we've lightened, or I've lightened already, and the front pulley, and then weigh that and see where we're at. So what I'm doing now on the XFLOW Formula Ford crankshaft is I'm just going to change the settings on the machine now to balance the flywheel. I said about balancing the front pulley earlier, but there is no front pulley to balance because it's dry sumped. It's so small, there's nothing there to be able to drill. And every time I've tried one of the dry sumped front pulleys, it's never really been out. So I'm going to just tighten up the flywheel to the crankshaft. And as you can see, it is actually a fair bit out of balance, 86.2 grams. So we're going to let that spin down, work out exactly where on the balancer it needs the metal taking from, or the flywheel, sorry. Blinking drill's gone flat now. So we'll see how much of a difference that first balancing hole makes. So we've got that down to 74. All I'm going to have to do is go and charge the battery up on the drill. So that's the flywheel all balanced. It's quite a way out, and now it's down to 4 grams on this plane here. So what I'm going to do now is bolt on the clutch and then balance the clutch. So I'm going to weigh that, change the settings in the machine slightly, and then basically it was out with these holes here. So it's quite bad, and I just had to trim it here just to get it perfect. So I'm going to unpackage his clutch now. We'll get some measurements from it, bolt it on, and get that bit done too. So that's the flywheel, just ever so slightly out at 49 degrees. So these Helix clutches, sorry, clutch not flywheel, are normally quite good. So we'll just get a little hole in here and hopefully we'll get it bang on. Let me I'll just move this back a bit. See, that's now in balance, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit more work on the clutch so I can bring it in roughly about the same point as the front end of the flywheel. So it's probably just one more go. Hopefully that's the job done. We'll see while the crank balancer just builds the speed up. We can watch the speed here as well. That's if the camera's picking it up from here. We're at nearly 700 RPM. There we are. So both the flywheel and the front pulley are about 3 grams out now, but they're well within the target and well within where we need to be for the crankshaft balancer to be reading it as a qualified balance. I've printed off all my customers' data so we can have a look through that to see how far out it was out of balance, but I'm now going to give it the crankshaft a quick polish, mark TDC on the clutch and the flywheel so he knows that it only goes on one way, and that's that job done, and we'll be on to another one. It's Saturday again, and one of our engine customers has just popped down to, we're going to balance a flywheel and clutch for him, but this is a 450 horsepower VXR powered Astra, 5-door, 4-door, what we did a little while ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago. So it's got all the diff in it, EFR turbo, did it a little while ago. Local lad's got it from Reading. Did Rabbit tune this? Answer. Did Rabbit tune this? Yeah, tuned by Rabbit. They was in Basingstoke, but I think he's working remotely now. Hi guys, and welcome back to Grace Engine Development. First job I've got in is for a customer that left a load of MGB bits, including a cylinder head, after watching the MGB full rebuild, which I can leave the link in the description below for that. So the first, well, I've actually started one job, which was the cylinder head. I've put lead-free seats in that. So the next job that I'm going to do is the crank. So I've got it in my crank grinder already. I've leveled it up with this DTI here, and to get it level in the machine, we put the DTI on it on both ends, and then use these screws here to just move the chuck slightly. So I know that's perfectly square. Next job that I do is in one of my old bearing bucks. I do it for every crank. I don't actually know why, because I do know the sizes, but I just like a bit of paper to reference back to as I'm grinding. So I found my crank, I wrote down my standard sizes, and I've wrote down the sizes to go to 10 thou. So the next thing I'm going to do is start to just set up the fingers on the crank grinder to do the big ends first. So I'll adjust all that, get it ready to grind, and then we'll film some grinding. So I've just had a nightmare with the crank grinder. I'm absolutely smothered in something. Yeah, so I just come to use the suds on the crank grinder to do the MGB crank, and nothing was coming out. So I thought, well, I might just have a quick block. It sometimes gets blocked up in here. So normally it's just a case of undoing this coolant pipe and taking this out and just blowing it through. But it didn't work, and then I noticed that, well, it's always had a little water leak from down here. So we've taken all this out, and basically this here was absolutely filled right up to there with well, dirty old crud. I don't know what it was really, and then from there to there it was filled with coolant, and then it was overspilling in the water pipe and running out through the fuse box, so it's wet all the floor and everything. So we've taken all this off, we've taken the tap out here, and the tap was leaking internally. So we've pulled all the pipe from the inside, and what we're going to do is bring a pipe off the back of the pump, and we're just going to stick like a remote style lever tap here or down here somewhere, and then connect it to the back of the machine, so I've got some control over the coolant onto the wheel. It's a bit of a nightmare because I did want this cranked ground tonight, but it's a bit too late now, and this wheel's absolutely soaking with coolant. So what I'm going to have to do tomorrow is flood this wheel completely before I switch the machine on, because basically when I leave it overnight, all the coolant will soak to the bottom of the wheel, and it will be so far out of balance that it could just explode the wheel and make a right mess. So what I'm going to do is first flood the wheel, make sure that's absolutely completely soaked, switch it on, and then all the coolant will just centrifugally be pushed out of the stone, and then I'll leave the machine running for an hour just while it sorts itself out. I can keep an eye on that thing at the back there. That's what I'll keep an eye on, the vibration. If I give that a hit, you might be able to see that needle wobbling. So yeah, that's been a couple of hours fun, if not 3 hours fun, cleaning that out. And so I'm just going to screw this plate back up, and while I wait for Sam and Graves to get back, hopefully with a tap, I'll get on with some reboring. So last night we had a nightmare with the coolant not working, but we've managed to fix all the tap and everything now, so I'm on with grinding the MGB crank. Luckily this crank's at standard at the moment, so it will grind to 10 thou undersize. Starting to grind the journal now, so I'm gonna see where it starts to grind at, and then just set it on this dial as a reminder. So this is the continuous gauge all set up now, so I'm just gonna set it to 9 thou, because I've got to take 10 thou off the crank, but I want to get it within 9 and then re-zero it all. So if I switch the crank grinder on now, it will show you if it's got any ovality in it, which that's the oil way making it bounce, but there is about half a thou of ovality, so we'll get that out, no problem. So I can take that off now, and then just start to bring the wheel in. And that'll start grinding now. I can hear the sound of the coolant changing as it's trying to get through the gap of the crank in the wheel. And there we go, we can see it's just started cleaning up. And that's 1 thou off it now. So what I'm going to do is just move the crank to the right, which makes it grind off the left hand side of the crank a bit more. I'm going to get into the radius. So that's the MGB crankshaft all ground now. The main bearings are 10th thou under and the big ends are 10th thou under. So the next job for me to do is to polish the journals. MGB short motor that I'm putting together and cylinder head. I'm not building it as a full engine, but this is a customer that watched the MGB video and decided to let us do some work on his engine. So on this, I've reground the crank, I've rebored it, I've fitted the pistons to the rods. These are AE pistons, and it's been through the acid, it's all been debunged. So it's got new core plugs in it, new oil gallery bungs, all been de-rusted, skimmed the block, bored home, put a nice chamfer on it, and then the cylinder heads having new valves and new guides, so I'll show that in a minute as well. But yeah, this is what we're doing today. Oh, new cam bearings as well. So that's the MGB bottom end done. It's all torqued up, turns lovely. It's got build lube in there at the moment, so it's a little bit stiff, but it's new cam bearings, reground crank, rebored to plus 40, Norel pistons, ACL bearings, ACL thrust washers, Glyco cam bearings, new oil gallery bungs. It's been through the acid, all the old paint's off it, I've de-rusted it, new core plugs. So all I've got to do now is finish his cylinder head, and then that's another one that's good to go. So I've been out at the garage today cleaning my car, and I come across all my old snap-on stickers. So I'm going to sort them out and stick them, not stick them, I'm going to put them into this photo album that my wife sorted out for me while I was cleaning my car. I used to stick them on the toolbox, but then I've stopped putting them on the toolbox and started putting them in this bag, so I don't quite know what's in there, but we'll have a look. So there they all are. There's quite a few tripled up and doubled up and stuff like that. The snap-on sticker thing used to be really cool back in the day. They don't do so many of them now. My friend Pete actually got me into these. He was one of my snap-on customers that builds gears, or makes gears, engineers gears, and he's got about 4 photo albums filled with stickers going back years. Let's get him in the photo album. And there we are, it's all done. Snap on. I haven't really put them in any order, I just wanted to display them. Got a fair few left though. I've doubled up on stuff or tripled up. I have to find a sticker to put on the front as well. That's it, that's all done. That can go on the table now in the engine build room, or when people sit and have a coffee, they can just have a flick through and just see them all. That's what I like about Snap-on, their promo stuff, their stickers and some of their toys are so cool. Cool, thanks for watching guys.